Part of the thing that I love about being a Christian physicist is that pretty much everything I say pisses off everyone. The more of an expert you are in a field,
Yes.
the less you believe that you know. I think I'm not supposed to work for God in a church. I think I'm supposed to work with God discovering his creation.
Welcome to Unfiltered Fruit. Today on Unfiltered Fruit, we are welcoming our guest, Alec Lancaster, an American-born immigrant to Europe who came to CERN in 2022 for 1 year and never left. He's a husband, cat dad, worship leader, proud nerd, and a lovable, audible Christ follower. Known for his suspicious attachment to one of his guitar, he's a geeking out over physics and his readiness to help anyone. Alec brings heart, humor, and a little quirk to every room he's in. Welcome! I'm really pleased to welcome you. I was already excited when Danny introduced me to you. Because Danny, the people she introduced you are always amazing. However, speaking to you, when I spoke to you, I knew we had to have a conversation on Unfiltered Fruits. And
there was so much that we were avoiding talking about so that we could have it here, which is... So I've been looking forward to it for a while.
So thank you so much for just already accepting to be also part of it. And really, there is no really feel comfortable. We're having a conversation. Nothing is being filtered, like the title is saying, and we'll just let His Spirit lead us.
Sounds good.
There's no specific format, and I would definitely ask you all type of questions because I'm also very curious to also learn more about it. And so we'll be tackling about life of discipleship. So what is a life of discipleship?
Yeah.
In terms even practically, because sometimes it's very theoretical, but what it means in our everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't say much, but also with the background that you have, like the work field that you have. I'm not going to say much now, but it's even more interesting for me.
Maybe should we just for the listeners, maybe I should give a bit of overview of my background as to why I'm here.
Yes.
Maybe that would be good.
Maybe before you say that, first describe who you are without the labels.
Oh, it's so hard. Okay.
And then you can say what you do.
So, man, I think growing up in the United States, we tend to, the first thing that we say whenever you ask us, oh, what do you do? Who are you?
Yes,
I say, I'm Alec, and I'm this, and this, and here are all of my identifiers, right? So this is a challenging question for me, but I think what I come around on is just, I consider myself someone who is pretty much the same no matter what context you find me in. If I'm at work, if I'm at church, if I'm at home, I think I'm relatively the same person in all of those spaces. And in a way, I feel that I try to just be as unfiltered as possible 100% of the time.
Okay.
I think probably the most filtering I'm going to do on myself right now is just that I probably won't swear because I do that a bit too much in real life. But on a podcast like this, maybe it's not the best thing.
Yeah. But it's still unfiltered, the fact that you're mentioning that. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a very imperfect person who tries to be pretty much the same everywhere, no matter where I am.
Yeah. But But nobody's perfect either way.
Yeah, exactly.
But just the fact that you're embracing that, and I think that's the first thing that struck me when I was speaking to you is you're authentic in the moment that you are.
I appreciate that.
So it really made me comfortable and even more curious to understand even more your journey, to even also feel comfortable to ask you questions. Sometimes questions that were like, should I ask or not?
Oh,
but you gave your liberty to be authentic is also contaminating the person.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's pretty much no question that I won't answer.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get offended easily, especially by. Well, anyway, we'll see that. I hope.
We'll see that. Yeah. And so, before you say a bit more about what you do, because we're talking about spiritual formation, which is a human thing, and to be human is to constantly change.
Yep.
And it's not because when we're in a spiritual formation that it's about just for people who are followers of Christ. It's also for non-believers because we evolve, we grow, we fail. We come back together, sometimes not. It depends. But it's the beauty of the journey of becoming and abiding also in Christ for those who follow the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it will be, we can now dive in and we can get to know more what you're doing and where there's so much, I don't want to say mystery, but complexity because of the way it's being portrayed in the way we live or in the world. So I will let you share.
Yeah. So I'll start, I guess, with a little bit of background as to why I find myself here. So I was, I was a pretty gregarious kid growing up. Like, I guess, I got good grades. I studied hard, whatever. And at some point I was like, I'm going to be a youth minister. And I was probably 13 or 14 up until maybe 15 or 16 when I was thinking that. And then, I was in high school and I took at some point physics, and then I took like pre-calculus, and my teacher, Paul Wilm, if you're listening, anyway, he comes up to me and says, "Hey, we are doing, we're offering advanced placement calculus and physics for the first time next year. I think you should take both of them." And I was like, well, I'm just going to be a freaking youth minister. Why should I take these, complicated math and physics classes? But I wrestled with it for a while. And I went home, and then it was like the next Thursday, whatever. I remember it was a Thursday because we always had worship team practice on a Thursday.
Okay.
And so I was on my way to worship team practice. It was like a 10-minute drive. And I realized, I think I'm not supposed to work for God in a church. I think I'm supposed to work with God, discovering his creation.
Where is the illumination coming from? Just suddenly?
I think it was the question within myself of, why am I committing to doing this really hard schoolwork if I'm never going to use it in my life? And I think God kind of so I was trying to find an excuse to be lazy and to not take these hard classes. And I think that opened up the door for God to be like, hey, it's because I'm bringing you somewhere else than where you think you're going.
But that's deep because you were around, what, 12?
At that point, I would have been probably 16 or 17.
16, okay.
But I had, since I was 12 or so, thought that I was going to be a youth minister or maybe a psychologist or somebody who was working directly with people, whether it's in a church or in some kind of Christian setting, right? I really thought that that's what I was kind of destined to do, if you want.
So that means that it was also maybe for you a step of faith. I mean, did you know for sure, or you just decided, okay, let me try and see how it evolves?
It was kind of funny. I was driving there. I was driving to the church, and it hit, and then I just felt relieved, as if something in my mind, it's like these gears were kind of grinding up against each other. And then once I had this directive, if you want, they just were, everything was smooth. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to be, at that point, I thought I was going to be astrophysics. And I eventually came to find out that that's, a nearly impossible field for someone like me to get into. But, so yeah, I mean, I spent the next, years of my life, in finishing high school and in undergraduate. Most people will change their major in undergraduate a few times, especially in the US. I didn't change my major once.
You went straight.
I went to Loyola University in Chicago with a declared major of theoretical physics and applied mathematics, and I did not change it. I added a minor in computer science along the way, graduated, and at that point I had an internship at Argonne at this lab in the U.S., and I had 1 or 2 internships there, and then I just was applying to PhD programs, because that's kind of the process, right? If you want to do physics, it's really hard to do anything without a PhD.
So you knew what were the steps in order to reach the goal that you had in mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a long process. I still don't have my PhD. I'm about, a year away from graduating or so. But this was a work that was started in me when I was 17, 18. So it's been like 10 years.
But so then, because it's already very quite unique. I mean, I would say in general, because we first try something and then we change. But it was, I don't know if you knew exactly. I mean, it looks like you knew, but you never changed the trajectory.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's in science, it's quite, I would say, with the fact that you wanted to be a youth ministry, and then science is really the complete opposite.
It's very different.
And I'm wondering, what was then, did you ever had like an encounter that really crystallized your relationship, that made it real for you? Because you are changing from A to Z. It's not complementary, it's not close to each other. So I'm wondering, what was your basics at the beginning, and if it was just that you had faith about God, or you had something like really unique that made you, because the way you're talking, it looks like you are always checking with Him in what you do, because it made you question, okay, if I'm going to do this, for how long? What's the meaning of it?
Yeah.
And we can ask those questions, but to be so confident and sure, it's not always a given. So I would be curious to hear more.
Well, I probably should have mentioned, I kind of grew up sort of Christian. Like my mom raised my brother and I trying to, pray and all this other stuff, but we never really went to church. I never really read the Bible. I sometimes prayed, but it was like, anyway. But eventually when I was like 12, my parents got divorced, and throughout that process I needed something. And my mom was like, hey, there's this church that has this youth ministry. Maybe we should try going. And it was like a house on fire for me. Like I started spending more time at this church than I did at home. And it was, I had my best friends from that time are still some of my best friends now. And so I was really immersed in the kind of like culture of the church. Right. So you have this elementary idea of you're supposed to follow God, and you're supposed to be within His will, and you pray every Sunday, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, and also in my life or whatever. And I never really knew how, because okay, how do you follow God, right?
Yeah.
And if you look, as I was standing on the curb earlier, I was like, I haven't looked up the definition of the word disciple. So I looked up the definition in the dictionary. And basically it comes down to just like a follower.
Yes.
Right. And so in the journey of discipleship, I feel like literally all you're trying to do is follow God. That's it. It's a complicated thing to do.
Yeah, yes, it is.
But for me, you know, years later when I kind of got this feeling, this directive, it kind of clicked into place. And honestly, I never questioned it. Like, it was just like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to do physics. Cool. And okay, God, if you want me to do that, I leave it in your hands to open the doors. Right. And I went through the rest of high school, through university, and it felt right. And so I kept doing it.
Okay.
And I kept checking in, and I had mentors and ministers who with whom I was talking and saying, hey, help me to continue on whatever path God has set me on. If at some point it becomes evident that I'm doing it for myself, if at some point it becomes evident that I'm being called somewhere else and I'm resisting, help me figure that out. Right?
Wow. So at that time you were already aware and asking those questions to your community to be sure that it's not your flesh, but what it has put in you, and that you're walking in it.
Yeah, and I don't want to come off all high and mighty with it.
No,
like
no, no,
it really
no,
was kind of selfish in a sense, because I had grown up being told, hey, you need to follow God. You need to be in His will. And for me, I didn't want to be outside of that because there were potentially consequences for being outside of God's will in my early Christian brain,
yeah.
right? And so for me, it was a matter of self-preservation, of saying,
okay,
I want to stay in God's will. How do I do that? I don't know. Let me talk to all these people who maybe know. So
Very
especially
interesting.
my friend Gwen, at the time my youth minister and now one of my best friends, I said, if at any point you feel that I'm not supposed to do this, like, please tell me and I will quit. Like I will stop. And I mean, that hasn't happened yet. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess to kind of go back to the question of, was there a moment that it was made real for you? And yes and no. It was kind of just the cogs were greased a little bit, and it felt as if I was on a bit of a river following God's will in a way. And it's been that way for a while.
Wow. That's a blessing.
There's been a lot of challenges. Like in undergrad, physics is not an easy discipline.
Definitely.
In undergrad, I experienced my first test failures. I experienced my first real academic trials, and I always went back to. There was one day where I was leaving my dorm, and I was really struggling because I was failing and failing and failing. And I remember listening to one of my old youth ministers, Jeff. He had a podcast where he just read a scripture every night. And it was Colossians 3:23, which if you're familiar, I think it was, which if you're familiar is, whatever you do, do it as to the Lord and not for earthly masters. And I realized as I was walking to class, I've been doing this for myself. Crap. And every time since then that I feel that I'm struggling in classwork, research, whatever, it's usually because I realize that I'm doing it to try to make myself look good or be good or be impressive. Right.
Yeah, I see. And to top up on that, so when you were in your, because, in physics, there's different steps, and you say that you're leading towards having a PhD. Was there ever a moment where your scientific research has challenged you in your faith, or actually confirm what you're actually doing? Because, faith and science can be looked at as as an opposition.
There's a seeming conflict there.
Okay.
Right. And I kind of come at science from a faith perspective.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, I come at faith from a science perspective. So it's funny how they kind of inform each other for me. But look, I think there's a few answers to the question. Mm-hmm. One is if you're Christian. Mm-hmm. The other is if you're not. Mm-hmm. And then there's kind of a middle perspective as well.
Yes.
In my mind. Mm-hmm. So for me, if you're Christian, then you must believe that God created the universe.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if God created the universe, then he created science. Mm-hmm. And as far as I can tell, there is only one thing that God has ever created that can contradict him, and that's human beings. Right?
That's true.
And so maybe you don't believe that, but if you are Christian, then you believe that God created the universe and he created science. So science can't contradict God. The created cannot contradict the creator unless, I guess, you're human.
But and that's from a Christian perspective, a Christian, like a believer who's into science.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if you're an atheist, or if you just don't believe in God, then you might take that argument and be like, well, I don't believe that God created the universe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that allows for tension or conflict between science and Christianity or faith or whatever. Now, there's from a purely mathematical, purely scientific perspective, if you dig deep enough into physics, biology, any discipline you want, you'll find uncertainty. At the baseline of physics, you have, I'll try not to get too into it, but at the baseline of physics, there is indeterminacy. At the baseline of like psychology, which you can argue is a hard science or whatever, but there's uncertainty, right? Even in mathematics, there is one of my favorite theorems of all time. This, I believe, German mathematician, maybe Dutch. Anyway, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which states that within any, I'm not an expert on this, so don't quote me. But basically, it's within any logical system.
Yes.
There will be statements that are true, which cannot be proven.
Yeah.
And to me, that, and by the way, that is a provable fact. It's funny.
Because there are certain things in mathematics that you see that they're not able to prove at the end.
Right. So, and what I mean by this is that like the statement, the theorem that there are statements which are true, which cannot be proven, is proven. So that is a fact. But it says that there are facts that can't be proven. Right? And if you look at that from a purely mathematical perspective and you don't believe in God, this is a fact that we know.
It's already a fact. It's not a matter of even what you believe.
So, and you can believe that God is true or God is not true or whatever. But what you have to agree with, in my opinion, is that whether God is real or not cannot be proven.
Yeah, it cannot be proven, and it's leading me to something I was thinking, because the question of truth is a challenging topic to prove, and I think it's even more challenging in science.
It's interesting. I think generally Christians are the ones who want certainty more than scientists.
That's a good point.
At least, amongst people that I know, amongst Christians and scientists that I know.
Or would you say that it's human being who likes to be able to say that I can prove this is the truth?
Yeah. I think the more there's this it's sort of like Occam's razor, but it's a different. I can't remember the name. Somebody will yell at me and tell me what it is in the comments. I'm sure, but it's the statement that the more you know, the less that you believe you know, and the less that you know about a topic, the more that you might claim to know.
Okay. Can you repeat again?
So, the more you know
about
a topic, the more of an expert you are in a field.
Yes.
The less you believe that you know. And the less that you know about a topic, the more you think you know about that topic.
That's true.
And what this to me means is that the higher you get in a field, like, okay, I almost have a PhD in physics. I do not feel like an expert.
You still feel like there's still more to learn.
Yeah, I do not feel like an expert. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And anybody that's around in my level in physics or any other discipline, I feel would say the same. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. What are you talking about? There's so much that I don't know.
Yeah.
But most people, and this isn't a judgment, this isn't anything, it's just most people don't get to the point in a field where they're about to get a PhD. So most people don't get to the point where they realize how much they don't know. And so in academia, in science, you are trained up until the point where you realize you don't know anything, and then you get your PhD. Whereas in everyday life, and probably the majority of Christians fall into, you know, the average, if you want, which is not a bad thing at all. But the majority of Christians probably fall into that average where they feel that they know more than they do. And that, in my opinion, leads to a desire for certainty.
This
right?
is so good. What you just said, it's so good, and it's now make me think that that's where the life of discipleship is actually important, because when you look up to Him, you have a certain humility to check with yourself, do I really know the full truth, or do I have full visibility on what I'm learning or what I believe that I know? But this is where you just said is yes, and maybe it's because we're not being we're not. Let me rephrase. Our identity is not fully in Him.
Yeah.
So that we feel the need to prove that we know, or that we should justify everything that we are. We're saying, but as you just said, in science, there's certain things that we can prove. We just know that it can be proven.
And so I maintain that there is no scientific discovery that could be made that would contradict the existence of God. Not, and I do come at that from a faith perspective, where I just believe that, well, God created science, and so it can't contradict Him. But it is backed up a bit by this mathematical thing that there are statements which are true that cannot be proven. And I find such beauty in that uncertainty, because it kind of sets you free from the need to be certain.
Yeah, to be certain. Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Yes.
And it gives you the ability to just say, if I'm in a conversation with somebody who's not a believer, and maybe they ask me something that, you know, like they ask you the question of something like, oh, why does God allow evil to happen? Or some kind of difficult question that we wrestle with as believers and as non-believers. I'm perfectly comfortable saying, yeah, I don't know. And I think that part of the journey of discipleship is just not knowing and admitting that you don't know.
Oh, wow.
Because and look, I am not a humble person. I am not perfect. I have self-aggrandization everywhere. And part of discipleship is being humble enough to be led. Yes. But I think that it's easier to get there if you don't just desire certainty in everything. Mea culpa, I make mistakes every day, yada yada. That's kind of why I ended up here in a way. Like, I was applying to PhD programs, and I was accepted to I applied to 13 PhD programs, and I was rejected to 12 PhD programs, and accepted to one, and that's the one that's, you know, with Northern Illinois University, where I am now, or the place that I'm getting my PhD at. And it was the only program of the 13 that I applied for that would have allowed me to come to CERN in Switzerland.
Wow.
And I mean, there's a lot of other story there, but look, at the time also I was married, and I was relatively freshly married, and I was trying to figure out, where am I going from here? And I knew I wanted to do a PhD, but okay, where do I
go?
Yeah, and I was fortunate that I got accepted to the one university that was both close to where I lived at the time, proximity-wise, and that would eventually send me to CERN, because at the end of that marriage, I was given the opportunity to move here. So it's like one door shut and another door opened, and at that point, I kind of knew, like, it's not as if God was planning for this marriage to fall apart.
Yes.
It's not as if God wanted that, but we as humans are given free will, and we as humans are given the ability, again, we as humans are given the ability to contradict God. And his faithfulness was so confirmed to me in that moment, where I was given the opportunity to come here. And it was like this, there was like a branch in the paths, right?
Yes.
One way could have been, okay, this marriage continues, which I'm certain God would have honored and loved and been very happy about. And I stay in the U.S. and I finish my PhD there, and life goes on. But we as humans can make decisions, and I made a lot of wrong decisions.
Yes.
And that path branched. But, 5 steps back, God had given me, by closing all of those other 12 doors at universities that wouldn't have put me here, this one door still had a crack in it that would have left me the ability to come to CERN and to come to Switzerland and stay here for 1 year. By the way, it's been over 3 years that I've been here. So to me, again, going back to this question of, was there a moment that God really made himself real to you? And it was in that moment where I realized, you had my back this whole time.
And it's beautiful to...
Sorry, I know that's kind of off topic with what we were talking about, but yeah.
But it shows also the power of that there's nothing that is certain. That's, you're going through a trajectory in science, but you have no control. Even if you're giving your best, you're applying and everything, but there's still an area where you have no control.
Yeah.
And the fact that this was able to be manifested, and for you to see that all this time he had a bigger view about everything, it's showing how we can't have a certainty about everything, because you could have stayed in the US.
Yeah.
There was a free will to...
I could have said, no, I don't want to go to Switzerland.
Yeah, exactly.
I could have.
But I think it's where the beauty of it is. It's showing how God operates, and that we just follow him. We try to be like him, and then he leads and he surprises us.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask, would you say that it's during that journey that you felt like discipleship was hard?
Yes and no.
Okay.
And from the no side, I think it's because the next step was very clear at every point.
It was very clear because the doors were being opened, or because there was an alignment even with yourself?
I actually think it was more that this is going to get very imagey and theoretical,
okay.
But it was like I was walking and everything was dark except for the next step in front of me, because that's all that God was letting me see.
Okay.
And at every step, he was basically saying, like, you don't have to take that step, but that's the step. Like, if you want, I will not punish you. I will not hate you. I will not reject you if you don't take that step. But, like, that one's the good one. So you should take that step.
But why did you obey? Because you have the right to, as you say, that to take a different road.
Yeah, I think. Again, it felt right. It felt like what I was doing, and I cannot emphasize enough how much there were other people in my life, like the pastor of my church, Gwen and Tim, my surrogate mother and father in a way, my my friends, my family, like all of these people, my therapist as well. All of these people were kind of the voice of God to me in a lot of ways. That kind of made the next step clearer, right? And so for me, that was stepping forward, forgiving people when it was not easy, and even when I didn't want to. Stepping forward to packing my bags, stepping forward to moving here, and then just being here and knowing nobody, not speaking a word of French and all this other stuff, right? But it felt like I was doing the next correct thing the entire time.
Yes.
Even though I couldn't see that far ahead. I was just like, all right, I'm gonna do the next thing that I feel like I'm supposed to do. And I could have been wrong. I don't know. But I mean, it landed me where I am now, and I'm very grateful for that. So
yeah, because as I'm hearing and listening to you, there are a few things like the community, having the right community, the right people who will speak truth and light to you.
Yeah.
Because it has a lot of power. And the fact that you took time to work on yourself, therapy.
Yeah, that was necessary.
Because the way can be there, but if we haven't worked on ourselves, you cannot be transformed.
Yeah.
So somehow it's true that you walked in it, but you did your part. Like you did what you could do with what you have.
Yeah, and I completely believe that it is impossible to be a disciple of Christ without your community. Because if I was outside of a community at that point, if I was isolated, I don't think I would have had the guidance to know what the next step was. Maybe I could have, I don't know. But I was fortunate in the circumstance that I was in to just know, okay, I think I can tell what the next step is. The only thing I had to do was take it. And it wasn't easy to take those steps, but I knew what they were, right? And I was able to take them because of the people that were making them evident to me. So.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And that would be my last question. I mean, we could have continued for sure. Another question that I had for you was, because there is this, as we spoke at from the beginning, this Christian scientifics. And what do you think that could be done so that the gap can be filled between the faith community and the scientific community? You mentioned that there are Christian scientifics and they are scientific, but who are not necessarily believers. But I still, maybe it could be me, but I still see that there's sometimes a bit of a tension.
Yeah.
Because you see with now artificial intelligence, and that is also like rising a lot. Where how can we fill the gap? Is there someone who has the responsibility of it, or is it a question of awareness?
Look, I think the responsibility starts it starts in the hearts of the believers. I think if there is a tension between science and faith, I think it's because of humans, and specifically, I think it's mostly because of believers.
Interesting.
You have to start within yourself, I think. And
yeah, that's a good point.
Because look, if you're a Christian and if you're in an open, communication with God, I think that at some point you'll come to the conclusion that there is no tension between science and faith. There is only human will and free will and sin, really. And that causes this apparent tension that we focus on so much. And I think the reason I always try to look at things from both, the faith perspective and then like the non-faith, atheist, whatever you want to call it. honestly, most of my best friends are atheists. Maybe not most. Many of my best friends are atheists.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm in conversation with them,
Yeah.
there's, you have to realize that if we are starting, we kind of, in a conversation that you're having with somebody, if you're a Christian and they're an atheist and you're trying to work through stuff, you're kind of coming from a perspective of power because throughout history, the Christian faith has kind of been, in the Western world at least, been very dominant.
Yeah.
And it requires first a step back, be a bit humble, and understand that if you're speaking with somebody, you're not going to necessarily change their opinion. Debates really don't work, to be honest. What does work, in my opinion, is just having a conversation with somebody who might have a different belief than you. Iron sharpening iron sort of thing.
Yes. Oh, so good. Yeah.
Like if I'm talking with somebody who is not a Christian, I basically never try to convince them of anything.
But do you feel like you have room to be able to express yourself, and they can express themselves, and you just, you know?
I'm 100% okay with saying, I disagree with this, I disagree with that, I believe this, I believe that. But you have to come at it from a perspective of the tension is human. The tension between these two seemingly conflicting realms is completely human. There really is no conflict, in my opinion. And
is it human and also wanting to be right?
Yeah,
as we spoke about.
I think so. And look, I mean, whether you're in a relationship with somebody, like a romantic relationship, or a friendship, or whatever, I think many of the conflicts that we experience are just, I want to be right. Look, there is nothing I love more than being right. And
this is true.
My wife will tell you that constantly. I half joke and say, "Oh, I'm never wrong."
That's a good one.
and it's a bit. I mean, I am very often wrong, but I like to pretend as if I'm not. Yes. But I think a lot of these conflicts, a lot of tensions in general, start from a place of wanting to be correct, and it goes back to desiring certainty, and it goes back to a point of me wanting to colonize my certainty within somebody else.
Yes, this is so good. We just said there's always a need to convince the person of our own truth.
Yep.
But if we can just be comfortable that we have different truth and we can learn from each other, I think that's where the freedom starts as well. Yeah,
and this is why I say I think often the tension comes more from Christians than people in the science community. Because if you're in the science community, you, in some sense, are taught to not necessarily, for me, I'm taught to not need resolution.
Yes.
So the experiment that I work on, Atlas, publishes maybe 1,000 papers a year or so. And many of those are searches for physics beyond what we know to be true. Every single one of those papers, as far as I'm aware, that is looking for new physics has said, hey, we haven't found anything.
Yes.
We haven't found anything new. And you can look at that as a failure and say, okay, we haven't found anything new, so we've messed up. But I look at that and I say, we've published thousands of papers that all say the same thing, which is that, okay, there's nothing new that we can see.
But at least there's a mindset of trying.
Yeah.
You know, and the term that you just used, failure, what is really failure at the end of the day? Is it a way of also changing our mindsets, you know, and changing the way it's also probably transforming us as well? So,
And so I have been, over the last, few years as a researcher, I've had a perspective change that not finding anything new is not a failure. All you're doing is discovering that, okay, I guess God didn't put anything in that phase space. Yeah. Cool.
That's a good.
Great, fine. And that's valuable information. And the way that I apply that to this debate, if you want, is not changing somebody's mind is not a failure. Simply mutually expressing beliefs in a argumentative,
Yes.
non-confrontational way is success, in my opinion. And so before, I'm getting a little preachy, but before you
Go
enter
ahead.
into any debate with somebody, well, first of all, don't enter a debate. Second of all, if you do find yourself in a debate, you've messed up. Because really what you should be doing, in my opinion, is having a conversation that at the end, the goal is not to change any belief. If anything, your goal should be to change your own belief and understand their belief more.
Yes.
And I fail at this constantly. I know I'm being preachy. I need to say I fail at this constantly. But yeah, I don't think that this conflict gets resolved until we start within ourselves and say, okay, I'm going to be loving and accepting, period.
Yeah. So I think we can see that, as we've discussed, what we could say as a call to action would be to check first with ourselves, like our own beliefs, instead of being in wanting to be right or wanting to prove a point or wanting to the other person to agree with us. And then there was the part of the uncertainty that you shared as well. Am I missing something?
I mean, I don't think so. And I think if you look at the life of Jesus and the way that he forgave, healed, led, very infrequently was he bestowing certainty on people.
Yeah,
Instead of
that's
saying,
true.
I am the fruit, I am the vine,
Yes.
I am the living water. Like, he was very clearly, like, he knows, I am God. Take that as an axiom.
Yes.
Right. But everything else is pretty much, okay, like, you're human, you're imperfect, we are all imperfect.
We're all imperfect.
And just follow me. That's all you got to do. I mean, that's very complicated.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure we could talk it's just the conversation is so good. But thank you so much, Alec. I really enjoy. I didn't see the time. We could maybe continue next time, but thank you so much. Just your openness to be able to talk about science and faith and the way it's so intertwined with who we are as human beings, without even the beliefs of being a follower of Christ, but who we are and what we're always trying to seek first. And it's really connecting to what shall we follow first, and it's by following that we can.
And one thing I want to make very clear is that I don't consider myself somebody to be in a position to share wisdom with people, to be honest. I am very messy.
Like all of us.
Yeah, but like I'm very messy.
Okay.
My life is marred with a lot of has been marred with a lot of mess, and I'm happy to share any of that to anybody that wants to reach out. But like, I'm not like, don't follow me as an example. Please don't follow me as an example. I am incredibly lucky to be where I am. But I think, for me at least, where I am is a result of people helping me to follow God and to continue that journey of discipleship. But like, I suck. Seriously. I am not, I'm a crappy human. I'm a crappy human. And look,
you're a human being.
we fail.
Yes.
And failure and we're kind of like another thing that science has taught me is that failure is only failure if you don't learn something from it. Right.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. Thank you. I think we will have a hopefully We never know another part.
It would be fun to have
You-
an
we have
episode
a-
where we can get into
yes.
some like straight up, okay, here's some debates
Yes, yes.
that happen. Why do I believe that they actually shouldn't be debates, sort of thing.
All right.
That'd be
Thank
fun.
you so much. Thank you, and see you soon. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Unfiltered Fruits. If our conversation with Alec, which was, I could see, I'm sure you've seen how much we had to talk and we couldn't end. And if it has sparkled something, I would love to hear your own testimony, your thoughts, your comments. You can reach out. You can also ask questions to Alec if you want to hear more of his thoughts. And you can reach out to us on our social media channels if you have questions for him. And let's keep the conversation going. As well, don't forget to follow us on Unfiltered Fruits so you never miss a moment of honest, joyful, and challenging conversation about the journey of becoming. Remember, this journey isn't about perfect performance. It's about inviting Jesus in, making space and letting his love flow freely. So let's keep your heart open, your spirit curious, and as always, let's keep living unfiltered.